Welcome. We're going to start now. This is a panel to discuss affordable textbooks in higher education, and specifically the role of the library in provisioning those texts. As some of you know, there are two different programs that are very active today. One is Open Educational Resources, or OER, and the other is what is now known as Inclusive Access. We will be discussing both today. There's a little bit of a coincidence here. All three of the panelists represent institutions that my firm has been working with. And independently, we made the discovery that they were all working on some aspect of affordable textbooks. It was really quite a coincidence. So we brought them together, and we've been talking together about how to move these programs forward. Three panelists. We're going to begin with, to my left, Mark McBride. Mark is the Library Senior Strategist at SUNY. Mark will then be followed by the other Mark, Mark Cummings, who is the editor and publisher of Choice, a unit of ACRL. And I'd also like to thank Mark Cummings for being the wrangler of our slides today, which is a feat of no small significance. And finally, we have Gwen Evans, Executive Director of Ohiolink, on all the way to the side. So we'll begin with Mark McBride. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm incredibly humbled and flattered to be serving with my colleagues on this panel today. I will say this, that you know, the movement into open educational resources in SUNY started when our SUNY Student Assembly came to us and said, you guys have to do something about textbook affordability. And you know, this probably started sometime in the late 2000s. And to be honest with you, we had no real solution to this. Our solution was, you know, we can start plugging library resources into, you know, the learning management system. But unbeknownst to us, there was quite a bit of activity going on with OER, starting in around 2010, 2011 at our community colleges. There was a project called the Kaleidoscope Project, started at one of our community colleges, Tompkins-Cortland Community College. They were working with a gentleman named David Wiley and a woman named Kim Thanos, who turned around and formed a company called Lumen Learning. I'm going to talk about them a little bit later. But what they started noticing is that the OER could drive down the cost for students, but they also started making claims that OER helped with retention as well. And they figured access to course materials is the reason why retention in some of those courses were going up. And if anybody's ever served at a community college before or worked at a community college, retention is like the holy grail. And so when, you know, we started, you know, looking at the broader open educational resource movement across SUNY, we realized that, you know, this had been a growing movement that was growing underneath our feet. And, you know, it started at our community colleges. We started baking in open licensing to a grant program we have called the Innovative Instruction Technology Grants. We asked faculty that created content with this seed funding to openly license their material. We really had no, I mean, we weren't thinking in terms of OER at that time. We were really thinking more in the terms of open access. But we knew the Creative Commons as an organization, and we liked the direction they were going in with their content. And as we started to move through this OER space, we began to see that there may be an opportunity for us to scale open educational resources across SUNY. And so we started a little service called the SUNY OER Services. Our goal was to find 15 campuses in 2017 that we could work with to help scale OER. And then our governor made a wild announcement that him and the state ledge were putting $8 million on the table for open educational resources, and we did not see it coming. SUNY did not legislate for this. I was sitting on my couch about 4 months into my job, and my boss texted me, and he said, your job just changed. And he said, pick up the Times Union, I think we got to get moving. This was great fortune for SUNY. It also caused much panic because as the saying goes, more money, more problems. That was definitely the case because we did not know how to spend it. And if you've ever worked in a state institution before, you'd realize spending money is not always easy. What we were happy to find out is when we announced this funding, our campuses, not surprisingly, gobbled it up. And they started working on their own open educational resource programs. Now, we developed some workshops, some professional development, some faculty development activities for them. But what we started seeing was that when the faculty began adopting OER, it started changing the way they were approaching their classes. Now, we had always wanted more instructional design, more course redesign inside of our courses. We thought OER might get us there. We just didn't realize how quick it would get us there. We've noticed now that when our faculty are adopting OER, I mean, we do have our cases where people grab an OpenStax textbook, if anybody's familiar with OpenStax, and they plop it in their course as a replacement to their traditional course material. But what we're finding now is our faculty are actually taking that content, putting it into a digital format, and then making some changes to it, remixing and revising, if you will, and really redesigning their course. This is where our partner Lumen Learning kind of comes in. They were a little small company out of Portland, Oregon. They were probably the first ones in the game to start thinking about ways to start remixing and revising inside of a digital environment. And you know, lo and behold, after 1 year of us working with these, you know, with these OERs, we turned out saving $8 million. You know, the $8 million that came in from the governor split between us and our sister system in New York called CUNY. They got 4, we got 4, and we turned around and saved $7.8 million. Again, the money comes back next year. This time, we kind of advocated for it, I'll be honest with you. Like, give us that again, and let's see what we can do. And once again, we've had great fortune. We have campuses reporting now that not only are they starting to see great returns on savings, but they're starting to think there may be opportunities for us to really invest money into research in this space. We started an open education research lab at the University of Buffalo. There are a lot of claims out there about OER as like some sort of panacea, some sort of silver bullet. We want to take a step back and say, let's throw some empirical research behind this. Let's find out if OER is truly this miracle drug, if you will. If there's a way for us to kind of change the nature of teaching and learning in SUNY and OER can be the vehicle for that, then we will do it. As we started, you know, scaling up OER across the system, we had a shared service called the SUNY OER services that really had to change because we realized that our faculty needed a lot of help, but also our libraries needed a lot of assistance. When you start introducing OER, you're really changing the game for people. And so in order to change the game, you got to put some change management. And we have a lot of our campuses suffering from innovation fatigue. And any support you can give them when you're starting to change the paradigm, so to speak, and you start to move the cheese, they will gladly take it. And so our SUNY OER services is essentially a shared service infrastructure that includes like a curated course collection. It's curated OER material. You go to oer.suny.edu if you want to see it. It was developed with our partner Lumen Learning. We also have a playbook in hand, what we've learned from all our mistakes and what we learned from all our successes. We also have some sustainability planning tools because the key thing with OER is sustainability. And again, you know, there's also a community course if you want to get more into faculty development. We have high aspirations for OER across the system. And some of those high aspirations is, can we start looking at open education in the broadest context? You know, can we start thinking of OER as the vehicle to innovation, but also what does this mean when we start thinking in terms of open access? You know, what could this mean for individualized and personalized learning across the system? Because OER, you can really customize the content, change it to reach the students of all various education levels, and make personalized the learning environments that they're in. And as we start to move more into like an open access environment, I'm kind of speeding up here because I'm noticing the time, can we start looking at OER and open access as like a connection between an open education agenda within SUNY? You know, we have an open access policy in SUNY. It's going to require all our state campuses to adopt their own open access policy. This is happening the same time the OER movement's taking place. There's great synergies between these two movements. And what happens if we look at OER and open access as kind of us moving into a forefront of open education across the system? I will pass it off to my colleague Mark, but I will also want to end with this. In SUNY, we have a lot of our campuses that are working in these inclusive access packages, and we are open to the idea of inclusive access. And Gwen and I have had a few conversations about, you know, what are the opportunities that we have with inclusive access? Our only concern with inclusive access is that we don't necessarily want to buy the fire extinguishers from the arsonists. And when we start talking to publishers, or we start talking to any vendors right now, we really want to talk about partnerships. The real advantage we see with OER isn't just the access. We think it provides our faculty the opportunity to customize and individualize the learning experience for our students. And that, to me, is the end game and the long game. All right, 8 minutes is tough. You're up.
Good morning. If this session were an opera, my part of the presentation would be the intermezzo, because we have a robust program here and a robust program at Ohiolink. My name is Mark Cummings. I'm the editor and publisher at Choice. Got to remember to page down here. How do I get this down? I'm Mark Cummings. I'm the editor and publisher at Choice. And as you know, we are not the provider of educational materials, affordable or otherwise. But we did conduct a survey of undergraduate faculty this past spring. We sent out a survey to about 88,000 instructors, asking them essentially, what methods do you use to identify and evaluate and select materials for classroom instruction? And specifically then, we went on to ask, if you are using OER, how does that methodology change? We only got about 1,400 responses out of the 88,000, and I think that it's probably fair to say that this was a self-selected group. And I think the way you can tell that, let's see if this works, is 2/3 of the people who responded say they use at least some OER. 93% said they use at least some commercial materials. So there's a group of about 60% in the middle there that's using both, and I think that affects the outcome. These are not distinct groups, and I don't believe that statistically or otherwise you can make perfectly valid inferences from them. Nonetheless, we received a tremendous amount of information from the survey, and I'm going to share some of it with you here today. First thing we noticed, however, and I'm sure that you're all aware of this, is there's an enormous amount of imprecision in the world about what constitutes an OER. We asked these instructors to tell us what courses they were teaching and to volunteer lists of the materials they were using in the courses. Under OER, we got a lot of TED Talks, YouTube videos, library holdings, apps, websites, etc. Websites could be pretty much anything. So clearly the distinction between open education, open educational resources, and open is only imperfectly observed among this group. So I'm going to talk about three things. I'm going to talk about discovery, selection, and the typology of materials that people are using. I don't think there are any surprises here, particularly in this group. But there were a few little anomalies, I guess, that I think are important. First of all, when we asked people, so if you don't know what materials to use in your course, what do you do? Where do you look? When we asked the people who adopt commercial resources, they always went to peer recommendation first. And that was followed by web search and then reviews. As an editor of Choice, I heartily endorse that. But when we asked the OER instructors or the OER users, what do? Peer recommendation came first. A group of things loosely agglomerated as search came second. There's an other category in there. When you look at the actual responses for other, it's things like Google search, and then reviews. Yep. When it comes to selection, the OER adopters, not surprisingly, said that affordability was a driver of the selection process, second only to the quality and currency of the material that was used in their course. I'm sorry to say, and I'm not going to go into it today, but librarian recommendations uniformly rank at or near the bottom in all of these discovery and selection mechanisms. But among instructors who are using commercial materials, lo and behold, they said the same thing. Affordability was key, second only to quality and currency of the material. And I think this reflects, in this limited set, this heightened sensitivity to the issue of cost, and also maybe in this group in particular, a sort of awareness of the social justice issues that are involved in open education. Then, of course, we asked them what sort of materials they use. Everybody uses a textbook, you know that. About 93% said the textbook was their principal means of instruction, or principal support for their instruction. The OER instructors, textbooks fall to 60%, although probably that's because there are fewer works available there. The other factors more or less pan out to be rather equal, but it's clear that in both cases the textbook is the key element of classroom instruction. So I think there are some observations we can make from these extremely elementary points. And the first one is that so far as we could determine from our survey, OER selection is based not on an ideological commitment to open education, but on the issue of affordability across the board. Second of all, as Mark said a moment ago, there was a pervasive sense that people who did adopt OER textbooks were simply withdrawing the commercial textbook from the course and replacing it with an open source, typically OpenStax. And they did that then without changing the underlying pedagogy, but simply replacing one text with another. And from this, we can observe, again, very roughly, that for those people, for those of you who are interested in advocating for open education in its larger sense, I don't believe that affordability is a strategy of choice any longer. I know it was initially, but I don't think it is now, because people are aware of affordability, partially through your efforts, in a way they have not been aware before. In fact, I think what we see from this is that there is a spectrum of open out in the field. That at the bottom starts with affordable and accessible and could be just about anything, with the 5 R's in the middle here, and then a serious commitment to revising pedagogy itself, open education at the top. And I think this means, from our survey anyway, that as a transitional strategy, the quality and availability of works, that is to say their discoverability of OER material, should be emphasized as a way to move people up this ladder here, away from simply affordable into something closer to the aspirations of open education. Now comes the pitch. One way to assert this value, of course, is through the vehicle of reviews. Reviews play a dual role here, both of these roles strongly endorsed by the survey. First of all, reviews play a role in discovery, particularly when there is a sufficiently dense aggregation of these reviews that you can make meaningful comparisons. And second of all, they stand as a proxy for direct peer recommendation. We went to several schools during our research over the last year, and people always said, well, if I don't really know anything about the course specifically, I'll talk to my colleague at a nearby university. I mean, that's how you do that. That's how any of us would do that, I think. So reviews are critical to this. And as a result of the survey, we have created at Choice an OER review template, which is now available on an open website for you to download. It's in right now, a transitional form. We're trying to make it fully interactive. Right now, you just download an MHT file. But we're actually rather pleased with this template. It is highly granular. It asks the reviewer to engage the source text under 12 basic categories, starting with format and provenance and subject matter. But at the end, and specifically, comparing this work to competing commercial works. Because the only way any of this is going to work is if the things that are created out of this enormous creativity, right, that is coming out of this movement, they have to be better. They have to be better written. They have to be better edited. They have to have a smarter pedagogy than the things that they're competing against from the commercial world. So we encourage you, I'm going to get to the URL in just a second, we encourage you to go to that site, download the template and use it yourself. Tell us what works, tell us what doesn't work. And while you're there, you can also read the white paper that Stephen Bell at Temple University produced, summarizing the full results of the survey that we did this last spring. It's at choice360.org/open-choice, excuse me, that's the template, /librarianship/whitepaper. You'll find it. It's a pretty simple site. Anyway, we have some copies at the back of the room, but of course, downloading is probably the preferable way to go with that. So with that, I'll turn this over to Gwen. Thank you very much, everybody.
So I'm Gwen Evans, the Executive Director of Ohiolink, and I think there's a tremendous opportunity for academic libraries to take a leading role in textbook affordability efforts beyond OER. We of course think that libraries have an important expertise to share in affordable learning discussions, as well as being very important stakeholders. And as Mark alluded to, and I will talk about later, this Mark, not that Mark. I would encourage you to get involved before outside forces do to you, make decisions for you that you're not quite ready for. So just a little about us. We are not a system like SUNY is a system, but we cover almost all of higher ed in the state of Ohio, 90 institutions, but that is all public institutions, 2 years, small independents of any size, the State Library of Ohio and the Cleveland Clinic, which actually has, I think, 46 FTE. So that is about us. And why libraries? Well, we've always been at the crux of affordable learning in institutions of higher education, right? The idea of a collection of content shared among over many generations means that more people have more access to more and better content than they could ever afford on their own. So library consortia like Ohiolink leverage their negotiating power and their sharing networks to make even more content available than would normally be available at any one institution. So this is something that, of course, libraries are already supporting in various ways, and we took those efforts one step further. So over the last 2 years, our affordable learning initiatives included joining the Open Textbook Network and taking on open educational resources by providing technology support and expertise for a $1.3 million state grant to a coalition of our members to create OER course packs. Most recently, we've moved into negotiating textbook price agreements with commercial publishers. Our substantial support of OER really enhanced our ability to move aggressively into negotiations with publishers. We learned a lot about the real costs and challenges of textbook creation and adoption as part of our OER support, and it very much influenced the way we approached commercial textbook affordability. So how did we find ourselves in that position? In March of 2017, Governor Kasich proposed legislation for $300 cap on textbook costs to students, requiring Ohio public institutions to pick up the rest of the cost. So panic ensued, as you might imagine, but it had the positive effect of focusing the attention of the Ohio higher education community on the issue of textbook affordability. So as a trusted unit of we're a state agency of the Ohio Department of Higher Education with some knowledge in this sphere, they increasingly called upon us to provide advice and ultimately leadership. So concurrent with our OER efforts, which they were supporting, they kept asking us, why can't you negotiate for commercial textbooks the way you negotiate for big ebook packages? And of course, we kept saying it's not the same. The business fundamentals are not the same, but we don't like to admit defeat in the face of a problem, so we kept thinking about it. And one of the most useful conversations that we had was with a publisher we already had a long-standing relationship, which was Wiley, who introduced us to their journal ebook side, introduced us to the textbook side, and we started talking. And we talked to them for almost 2 years, proposing, assessing, and rejecting traditional library business and acquisition models that just didn't work in the textbook environment on a statewide level. So we really paid a lot of attention to stakeholders outside the libraries, faculty, students, directors of auxiliary services, provosts, and bookstores, the people with the most information and interaction with how textbooks actually get chosen, delivered, and used. And we soon realized that we probably could do something with the inclusive access model. So given that no successful campus initiative that I am aware of ever started with and ended with the phrase, if the faculty would just, and given our experience that market adjustments in the price of published materials also don't happen by saying, if the publishers would just, we settled on inclusive access as a model where we thought we could effectively negotiate at scale, protect academic freedom, very important to the faculty, and deliver short-term savings while still supporting long-term OER strategies. So inclusive access is digital only, day one access for all enrolled students. There is an opt-out process, and it's integrated into the course management system and billed automatically through the bursar as a student fee. So there are other benefits besides affordability, but it offers benefits to both parties at this point in time. The publishers have an incentive to drop their prices because they get better sell-through, and institutions have the opportunity to deliver cost savings to their students quickly and at scale. So we settled on price agreements with these publishers, agreements that cover their entire catalogs with a very few exceptions. These are the big five plus Sage, cover more than 85% of the textbook market, so that's where we concentrated our efforts. If all Ohiolink institutions moved their current adoptions into inclusive access, the potential cost savings is $50 million per year for the students in Ohiolink. Now, we're actively working on business intelligence and data analysis to make sure that our agreements stay competitive by using Verba Connect to pretend to be a campus bookstore and check our pricing against the national market in used print, digital rental, and other prices. So this is just a very quick overview of the terms of the price agreements that we negotiated. I want to mention this is not a mandate. Our institutions don't have to do this. They don't have to stick to these publishers. There's an opt-out process for students. And it is net to publisher pricing, which is the equivalent of a wholesale price because we can't do anything about retail markup at bookstores. So the discounts are mostly two models, either a flat price per title for the entire catalog or a standard discount off the entire catalog. And we did negotiate for long-term or perpetual access for students to keep access to those textbooks beyond the course. So our first step was to issue a request for information, and which was very illuminating. We got consistent answers from aggregators like VitalSource or RedShelf about what publishers control, which helped later in negotiations. This is the biggest obstacle to scale and ultimate cost at students. Every campus has its own contract with bookstores, and institutions derive profit from those relationships. I don't know why it keeps auto clipping. Because of exclusive rights to provide textbooks on campus, the idea of an Ohiolink all-state inclusive access textbook with no retail markup, which we briefly considered, was not going to be an available option for the vast majority of our campuses. So our Ohiolink Basket now includes commercial textbook deals, OER materials, and traditional library content such as ebook collections and databases. We used our experience with our traditional publishers, our growing support for OER creation and adoption, and faculty and student input to create an affordable learning strategy that puts libraries at the center of a very important issue for both students and institutions. And our textbook affordability journal came full circle, proposed but ultimately abandoned legislation from the governor's office, to Ohiolink and our libraries stepping up into a leadership role, to being invited to give a textbook affordability panel at the State of the State activities when the governor addresses the challenges and successes of the last year. So we became a trusted source in this. Our libraries they had a variety of opportunities to put themselves at the center of conversations on campus and at the state level, and they had not always been invited there before. I've put some more, there's an appendix, which they made fun of, with more detail, because I know librarians, they want the detail, but now I think we're happy to answer questions.
For the record, not all of us made fun of the appendix.
Thank you. So we have two different models here. We have OER and we have inclusive access, and we see libraries can play a role in both. Some questions?
I have two questions. First is for Mark and SUNY. How many % of textbooks you provide to students via OER?
So the last time we ran our analysis last year, we tackled about 6% of all the general education offerings in SUNY. This year, we're looking at about 15% of the gen ed offerings. We can't really get a good track on some of the upper level courses because they're kind of all over the map, but the gen ed offerings, we really seem to be making a huge impact there.
Thank you. Second question is for Mark and Choice. And as a publisher, what is your role in the OER?
In OER? We have started an initiative, which I briefly alluded to during our conversation here this morning, to in support of OER and open education through creating a review platform and hopefully a peer-to-peer platform where instructors can speak to one another about their experiences using OER in the classroom. This project is still in its rudimentary stage, but we have about our reviews are coming in at about 2,000 words using this template. We have about 150 of them currently in process right now, and we hope to publish them sometime probably next year. But we have no particular ideological commitment one way or the other. We're trying to remain agnostic because we serve the library community as a whole. So we are not necessarily advocates for any one of these two solutions one way or the other. We're more concerned with evaluating the content of works than we are with the business models behind them.
Hi, I'm Amy Harris from MIT Press, and I think my question may turn out to be more provocative than I mean, but I've worked my entire career at university-based publishers, and you talked about not buying a fire extinguisher from the arsonist. And so I was curious to ask if the panelists could talk about how you've engaged university presses, university-based publishing entities, nonprofit organizations that share the values often of libraries and their institutions in this process of OER generation and advocacy.
All right. Well, thank you. I didn't think that was too provocative. I think my statement probably was a little more provocative, if we're going to put it on a Mentimeter. I will say that our SUNY Press, we have a university press. They've been good partners in this. They've helped us develop a print program for our students because especially at our community colleges, our students are still demanding a print option for OER. What's interesting is we actually ran a survey with our students, and when asking them if they preferred print or digital, overwhelmingly they said both. Of course, if you offered me pizza or chicken wings, I would take both. I wouldn't just take one. But I think what the seriousness of that is that our students, when they're reading large amounts of text, would prefer to have something paper-based. I don't think paper is going away. And so our SUNY Press has been instrumental in helping us develop this print program. And the other side of it is, our university press, probably very similar to most university presses, are going through a major transition. Libraries have stopped buying print monographs, and so they're trying to determine their future. And they're in the game right now of actually, publishing open monographs. And I think they're kind of pressure testing this idea of being involved in more OER creation, because I find the university press to be instrumental in the future direction of open content development in SUNY and across higher ed. I think it's just difficult for them to get there because it's high risk. It's high reward, but it's also high risk.
So some of the my interlocutors from the university presses are in this room because Gillian Berkowitz, who recently retired at the Ohio University Press, brought together a regional university press and librarian summit every year to talk about our mutual challenges and issues. And I learned an incredible amount from them about how hard it is to publish something that informed the way we approached OER, and especially the sort of length of time it takes to produce quality content at length, the amount of editorial support you might have to give, especially a first-time author, which first-time textbook authors, if you're encouraging faculty to create. So I would say that for us, conversations with university presses was critical to creating our approach, which is hybrid, which is do OER where you can do OER, but it is going to take time and resources, and in the meantime, give some short-term savings to students by working with commercial textbooks.
Hi, I'm Stephen Rintut. I'm really interested with the $50 million number that was thrown out. And I wondered if the panel had actually were aware of the report or had an estimate themselves of collectively just how much has been saved. I saw Ivy Anderson yesterday mention a 6.1 million number for CDL. Is there anywhere written up, or do you guys actually have an idea collectively of just how much has been saved?
I can't answer this directly, but I know that traditionally the figure $1,200 a year for textbook costs was thrown around and is widely used as a multiple here. I suspect, and I think more recent research has shown that it's probably a little less than that, but what what people are doing is simply applying that multiple to a number of students, and so it's chimerical, but as a rough approximation, and certainly as a talking point, it's very effective.
So one of my data problems is precisely that, because as a state agency, that's what I get. Like, how much money, how can you prove we're saving this money? You can't. So that 50 million was if we asked the publishers about their adoptions in the state of Ohio. So one, it's data coming from publishers about current adoptions in the state of Ohio. So that's a particular snapshot in time. And then if every class moved into the inclusive access model, which will not happen, that's just the potential. But so that's the commercial side of the house. The OER side of the house, because we're supporting this grant, again, the mechanism, given the way that faculty adopt textbooks in a very decentralized process, it's really hard to track that at scale unless you have a little bit of administrative or sort of political leverage, which they might have at SUNY.
I got 3 points to make. I'll make them really fast. One, ours is based on economics, not on math. We're going with the assumption that all students have purchased the materials for the course, and we know that's not true. So that's where we're coming up with our numbers, to be fair. Second, we're actually starting a research project right now where we're talking to students about their textbook purchasing behavior. And the reason students don't buy textbooks is not just because of the cost. And when you really unpack what students are saying, I mean, they're human beings, right? Sometimes we try to make things so binary, right? We oversimplify a complex problem. They make choices, and their decision-making is very complex. And I think many have figured they can get through their educational, path without having to purchase material. And then lastly, I'll say this. We know that the OER is having a positive impact on student pocketbooks. We do know that. What that number is, we're going to say, is probably around $8 million, only based on the number of students taking courses with OER. We have not tracked what our campuses who are offering inclusive access packages are saving our students. So I'm really interested in finding out from Gwen how they track that data, because I think there's a great partnership here, and we might be able to make some sort of a national announcement of how much money we're saving students between Ohio and New York.
Thank you.
So on those numbers, I just want to move them in the other direction. Prospectively, how much could be saved if you had the entire student population using inclusive access, not OER? You've got a $4 billion textbook industry in the United States. That's net to publisher, not a retail. If all the books were sold through at a 40% discount, which is the promise of inclusive access, the potential savings nationally is $1.6 billion. This is not a small thing. This is a major, major initiative for lowering college costs. Please.
Hi, I'm Brenda Carter. I'm with the American Psychological Association, and I've long been interested in affordable textbooks, so I'm very interested in the inclusive access model and have a question for you, Gwen, about that. One concern that I have as a publisher is how you set prices in the inclusive access model. I'm only familiar with the discounted model, which has a huge flaw in that it's based on what the publishers originally charge. So if you start out with a low-cost option, you're asked to discount off that. Somebody else can come in with a $300 textbook and they're forced to discount by the same amount. So that's kind of a flawed starting point. And I'm wondering how the flat price model works and how you actually compare, what's a fair price for each work?
Well, that was a process of negotiation, but I have to say we love the flat price model because it is very easy to communicate what is the cost under this model. But that was proposed to us by McGraw-Hill Education. They came to us with that and said, what if we did this? And we sort of did some research and said, that sounds good. So 3 publishers that we work with have a flat price model. The biggest issue for us was retail markup because the chancellor's office where I report was like, how are you going to control those costs? How are you going to, I can't control. They kept asking me, what are you going to do about Amazon? Nothing. I can do nothing about Amazon. Is going to figure out how to crush us all in 18 months. So that's why we focused on that wholesale net and our hope is, because we are doing a lot of marketing and communication across our institutions, that when institutions renegotiate their bookstore contracts, they will know what the markup is on these textbooks and will be able to negotiate bookstore versus bookstore about keeping that retail markup low. As I said, we did try and figure out at one point, could we run an inclusive access the Ohiolink bookstore, but because of those exclusive distribution rights, it wasn't going to work. But that what's a fair price? That was a process of negotiation with the publishers, just like we do any process of negotiation. But I much prefer the flat price model.
So what is the flat price model, though? So,
Okay, so
Yeah.
it is one price for every title in the catalog. So X amount of dollars for every title in the catalog. And then we negotiated because we didn't want STEM to get a lower price and humanities and social sciences like up to that price. So anything that falls below that price either stays at the market price or gets a standard discount. So for McGraw-Hill, they just said that everything in the catalog for X number of dollars and everything that already falls below that price, it stays there or in certain cases got a discount.
I would just put out there that I would imagine that there are plenty of small publishers who have books already priced below what the flat price would be.
Oh,
And-
that is
yeah.
that is flat price per publisher.
Right.
That is not flat price for every publisher.
No, but I mean in terms of promoting affordability. Yeah.
You know, the biggest issue, as I said, is if you are going to, I don't expect faculty to necessarily switch from one publisher to another just based on cost. And if they did, if they're going to revise their course, because that's what it is, they completely have to restructure their course in a lot of ways, then the obvious initiative for us is to push OER. So it's that this is a model that depends on faculty not having to do anything except the institution changes the delivery and billing model.
Yeah, which is amenable. Thank you.
Let's take one more question.
It strikes me that there's a very big difference in the amount of data you can easily get in the OER versus the commercial textbooks for assessing how the project is going. So I'm wondering, what are the plans to try and get data to work with for the OER? And for the commercial textbook deals, have the commercial publishers got some agreement to give you feedback about adoption rates or other information to assess?
Data is my biggest headache. And I would say, we just did this, so someone mentioned we're flying the plane and building it at the same time. So I would have to say that even with the data challenges of the commercial adoptions, the data is easier and they do collect it. It's how do you trust it? When do you get it? How do you calculate savings? But because it's flowing through the publishers know, they know what they're selling and they know where they're selling it. The issue is getting data from the institutions in a distributed environment where I don't have really political or administrative leverage. OER is a whole different thing, and I'm going to throw that to Mark.
So the low-hanging fruit is we can talk about affordability. We can talk about saving students money. To me, what's really interesting is, and our partner Lumen Learning has been working on this and a few other OER providers, is we're starting to track what our faculty are doing with the OER in the classroom, and that's where to me, the gold standard of the next wave of data in this movement resides. Because what we're able to do now is to find out what content isn't syncing in with students, and we can change that. And then we can make the content more accessible to the students, or maybe just change the way we're approaching it, and then watch how the student grades adjust as the content begins to evolve inside the OER. And so this cycle of continuous improvement with the open educational resources is really intriguing to me. And I think why I've become such an OER advocate is because what works in Mark McBride's class might not be what works in Mark Cummings' class, and we could both be great teachers. In fact, I would think we probably are. But The way I approach content in my course, or the way I approach particular material might be different than the way Mark approaches it. So I'm going to change the content so it's accessible to you and the rest of the students in the class. I can't get that with a commercial publisher just yet. I think some are starting to come into this space, and this is where it's going to get really interesting. But if we just stick a stake in the ground with this being an affordability solution, we're going to miss it. When you say Amazon's going to come in and eat our lunch in 18 months, listen, the market's shifting for all industries. Why wouldn't it come and start shifting ours? You know, the cheese is being moved across the country because now there are different options. There are more opportunities for people. And I think higher ed has a responsibility to change with the times. Again, I'm not here to bash publishers, but I do remember in 2006 when I was giving fair use workshops on my campus because we were getting cease and desist letters from publishers, and now they're coming to us and saying, hey, we can be your OER provider too. I'm skeptical. I'm happy you're seeing this, but I'm somewhat skeptical because I think you're seeing this as dollar and cents, and the capital that we have in public higher ed is slightly different. Although, yes, when it comes down to it, money does talk. It screams too.
So we're going to close here. I do want to make the point that we're not talking about a binary issue. It's not OER versus inclusive access. I think we all envision a pluralistic environment going forward where different instructors, different institutions find the programs that work best for them and their students. Pluralism seems to me to be the right thing to be looking for. Secondly, I want to be clear that this conversation is not stopping here. We are already in discussions about taking parts of these programs that are being developed and finding ways to put them into an industrial process so we can then export these things to various institutions. The number we're looking for is that $1.6 billion in savings for college students. So this is an ambitious program for which you're seeing just the earliest stages. And finally, I want to mention the person who's not here today, who helped orchestrate all this in the background. That is my friend and colleague, Roger Schoenfeld of Ithaca SNR, who very graciously hosted us in New York to begin these conversations. And Roger's own program is moving forward, as Roger always does. I'm sure many of you know him, with a very, very thoughtful program on research into OER that he's now initiated. Please join me in thanking our distinguished panelists for their work today.